Let's be honest, we're all drowning in headlines about security breaches. But today, we're going to cut right through all that noise. We're here to focus on one thing, the fundamental rules of cybersecurity that have seriously changed. We're going to look at what your team needs to be preparing for, like right now. So let's just dive right in.
So I want to start with a question, or really a statement I still hear way too often. If you, or frankly anyone on your team, still believes this, then you really need to listen up for the next few minutes, because this is your wake-up call. The game has completely, and I mean completely, changed.
Look, we're not here to just rattle off a list of scary headlines. We're here to find the patterns behind the news so we can figure out our next move. The real question isn't just what happened, it's how do we turn these stories into a smarter, stronger defense for ourselves?
And to do that, we're going to break down 5 recent incidents. But we're not just looking at the what. In each of these cases, we're hunting for the new norm, that fundamental shift in the rules that each event shows us. These, right here, are the new realities of cybersecurity.
All right, first up, GigWorks. Back in December, they announced they'd found unauthorized third-party access on a server. Sounds pretty standard, right? You've heard this story before. But the real kicker here is the timing. So check this out. What's really interesting here is that second point. GigWorks went public while their investigation was barely off the ground. They decided to prioritize speed and transparency over having all the answers. And that is a huge shift in how we think about incident response.
And that brings us to our very first new norm, the market. Your customers, they don't just judge you on if you got breached anymore. Nope, they judge you on how well and how fast you respond. Being transparent isn't some nice to have. It's absolutely critical for your reputation.
Okay, incident number 2. This one really builds on that idea of public perception. So a major IT provider for England's National Health Service gets slammed with ransomware, a classic supply chain attack. So, what do you think happened next?
Now, here's the crucial part. The NHS itself wasn't directly breached. It was their partner. But you know what? To the public, to the media, did that distinction matter at all? Absolutely not. That risk of data being stolen immediately became an NHS problem. And this leads us right to our second new norm. You can't outsource accountability. It's just not a thing. If your vendor gets hit, guess what? It's your incident now. You have to be ready to explain exactly who you rely on and why. Because when things go south, all eyes are going to be on you.
Now, let's talk about critical infrastructure. A massive attack on the Romanian Water Authority knocks about 1,000 PCs offline. Whoa. It's easy to picture some super sophisticated state-sponsored hacker group behind this, right? But the reality is often a lot less cinematic.
See, there's this really dangerous myth out there that a huge attack on infrastructure must have an equally advanced way of getting in. The reality? So often, the bad guys get their first foothold through the most basic, simple means.
And this is our third new norm. And I really can't stress this enough. A highly advanced attack does not mean a highly advanced entry point. It almost always starts with something simple. A compromised ID, one person clicking on a phishing email, an unpatched device. Getting the fundamentals right is more important than ever.
Okay, let's shift gears from the attack itself to the aftermath. Let's look at SK Telecom. After a breach that affected over 20 million people, a consumer agency didn't just fine them. They ordered the company to directly compensate the users. Now that is a total game changer.
So here it is, our fourth new norm. The consequences are now directly financial. And I'm not just talking about fines. The quality of your incident response is now being judged in cold, hard cash, leading to direct penalties. Your playbook for what happens after a breach is now a core financial liability.
All right, our final incident brings us full circle, right back to that question we started with. Recent reports have shown this relentless wave of attacks on small and medium-sized businesses in Japan, hitting companies like Bandai Channel and Jamati.
So, what's the pattern? What's the common thread here? Well, it's not some crazy zero-day exploit. It's vulnerabilities in the SaaS tools we all use every day, like insecure APIs. It's their vendors getting hit. And it's the simple stuff, cloud misconfigurations, or just giving people way more access than they actually need. This is the stuff that's tripping up SMEs right now.
And that brings us to our fifth and final new norm, and this is the definitive answer to our opening question. The idea, the assumption that you can be too small to target is officially over. It has completely and totally collapsed as a viable security strategy. Period.
Okay, so, given all these new norms, what in the world do we do?
Well, the entire strategic mindset has to shift. It's not enough anymore to just have defenses. You have to be able to prove your accountability.
And that proof? It's becoming more and more formalized. Just take a look at the transition to the new version of ISO 27001. That's the international standard for managing information security. As you can see, that deadline is coming up fast. The clock is officially ticking.
You know, for any organization that's still on the old version, this isn't a question of if anymore. It's a question of when. But don't think of this transition as just some compliance headache. It's really a strategic opportunity to build and, more importantly, to demonstrate a modern, robust security posture.
All right, let's pull all of this together. Let's build a new playbook. What are the actual, concrete shifts your team needs to be talking about today, based on everything we've just covered?
First things first, your whole defensive mindset has to evolve. For years, right, we obsessed about the perimeter, the firewall. Then the focus rightly shifted to identity, the user. But now we have to add a third, absolutely critical layer, the vendor. Your security is only ever as strong as your supply chain. So let's connect all the dots here. Your defensive priorities have expanded. They now include identity and vendors. Because of that, you need a new way to prove you're secure. That's where things like ISO certifications come in. They're not just a formality anymore. They are proof of accountability. And it all leads up to your incident response plan, which, as we learned from SK Telecom, is now a core business and financial risk that has to be managed from the very top.
I want to leave you with just one final thought, a question to take back to your very next team meeting. Looking at all these new rules, transparency, vendor risk, those simple entry points, the heavy scrutiny on your response, I want you to ask yourselves and be honest, where are we weakest? Because that's where the work begins.